in Windora City, where offices looked modern but hearts were still ancient, there was a company called Silverline Agencies. From outside, it looked like a place of success, glass walls shining, people in suits walking fast, and the logo at the entrance saying, "We build tomorrow." But inside that glass building, tomorrow always felt like yesterday, because behind every fake smile and every shining floor, there was one woman holding everything together, Maria. Maria was the cleaner, not the kind of cleaner who complains or gossips. No, she was the type who swept quietly, watched everything, and spoke only when necessary. For 10 years, she came to that building before sunrise, before the smell of coffee, before the bosses arrived with their expensive perfumes. Maria was already there with her mop, her old blue apron, and a song under her breath. She always said, "Clean floor, clean mind," but nobody ever listened. Her boss, Mr. Banda, the operations manager, thought cleaning was just about wiping dust. He never noticed how Maria could tell which staff was planning to resign, just by how they threw their papers away, or how she knew who was stealing company pens by watching who avoided eye contact. Mr. Banda never greeted her properly. Every morning, he walked in shouting, "Maria, mop faster. We have visitors today." She would smile gently and say, "Yes, sir. The floor is already waiting for your footsteps." He never caught the poetry in her words, because men like him never listened to women who carried mops. The office staff weren't bad people, just tired ones. They treated Maria like part of the furniture. If she smiled, they nodded. If she spoke, they said, "Yes, auntie," and went back to typing. But Maria didn't mind. She said the floor tells her more stories than humans ever could. One Tuesday morning, while she was cleaning the boardroom, she found a paper under the table, a crumpled letter marked confidential. She didn't mean to read it, but one line caught her eye. "We must delay staff bonuses again to cover management allowances." Maria froze. Her heart beat faster than her broom. For months, she had watched staff cry over unpaid rent, and she had prayed for them in silence. Now, she understood why things never changed. The bosses were eating the company alive with golden spoons. She folded the paper quietly, slipped it into her pocket, and whispered to herself, "Even dirt hides under perfume." Later that day, while she cleaned near the manager's door, she overheard voices arguing. Mr. Banda was talking to the general manager, Mrs. Chola, a woman with red lipstick and eyes that never blinked when lying. Greater than, "Madam, staff are starting to complain again. They are saying you promised bonuses." "Let them complain," she replied coldly. "They don't understand how business works. We need to cover our own costs first." But the cleaner sheet keeps hanging around the offices when we talk. "Who?" "Maria, that old woman. She can't even use a computer." "Don't waste your time." Maria's hands stopped moving. She felt the sting of insult more than the smell of bleach. But instead of anger, she smiled. Because when people underestimate you, that's when you see clearly. That evening, after everyone left, she sat on the bench outside the building. The city lights reflected on the glass doors. She looked at her reflection, tired eyes, strong heart, and said quietly, "You've cleaned their mess long enough. Maria, maybe it's time to clean something bigger." That night, she didn't sleep much. Her small room in Katando Township felt like it was whispering ideas. The wind outside kept tapping her window, as if saying, "Do it." She took out the letter again, read it under the weak bulb, and sighed. Then she opened her small notebook, the one she used to write daily tasks like wash floor, clean toilet, dust windows. But that night, she wrote something different. Operation Clean Heart. Next morning, Maria arrived earlier than usual. She cleaned like nothing had happened. She even hummed louder than normal. When Mr. Banda arrived, he said, "Auntie Maria, you seem happy today." She smiled and said, "Yes, sir. Even dirt has an ending if you mop long enough." He laughed, thinking she was just being funny. But Maria knew exactly what she meant. Morning came slowly over Kampala. The streets were dusty, and inside the office the air felt heavy, not because of heat but because of secrets. Everyone worked quietly, pretending everything was normal, but Maria could feel the tension. She had written in her diary the night before, "Telling the truth is never easy, but silence costs more." That morning she picked up her broom, again not just to clean the floor but to uncover the truth. Maria began to watch everything carefully. She noticed which drawers were always locked, who stayed late at night, and who avoided walking near the cameras. Slowly, she started connecting the pieces. Something was wrong. One afternoon, when everyone went for lunch, Maria slipped into the HR office. On a dusty shelf, she found an old folder named Project Dawn. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Inside, she saw mismatched signatures and fake approvals. The money meant for a new hospital had been stolen. She closed the file, her hands trembling. For a moment, she almost put it back, but then she whispered to herself, "If I don't do this, who will?" She hid the file in her cleaning bag and walked out slowly, her heart beating fast. That night at home, she told her younger sister, Amina, everything. Amina's eyes widened. She said softly, "If they find out, they will fire you." Maria smiled weakly and said, "Then let them. If I stay silent, I will lose more than my job. I will lose myself." The next morning, the office felt different. People were whispering. Maria could sense it. Someone had noticed the missing file. And then, on the notice board, a paper appeared. "Staff meeting Friday. Everyone must attend." Maria knew this was it. Something was coming. Friday arrived. The conference room was full. The director, Mr. Cato, stood up and spoke into the microphone. "Someone has stolen a confidential file. Whoever did this, come forward now, or we will find you." The room fell silent. Maria's heart thumped so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She wanted to run, but she didn't. When the meeting ended and people started leaving, she walked straight to Cato. "Sir, I need to talk to you." He looked surprised. You are just a cleaner. What could you possibly know?" Maria took a deep breath and handed him her diary, the one filled with notes, names, and copies of the documents. "I know who took the money, and I know where it went. If you really want justice, read this." Cato stared at the papers for a long moment. His face went still. There was anger but also fear. He said slowly, "Do you realize who this is going against?" Maria met his eyes. "Yes, but truth doesn't need permission." That night she walked home late. Every corner felt dangerous. Once she turned and saw a black car following her, but when she stopped, it disappeared. At home, she hid her diary under her pillow and said to Amin, "If anything happens to me, take this diary to the principal. It's proof." The next morning, the office was filled with police officers. Cato's office door was open, and guards stood outside. Within an hour, the news spread. The finance head, Mr. Dube, had been arrested. The missing hospital funds were traced back to his account. The office went silent. Then slowly people began to whisper, and this time they weren't whispering against her, they were whispering about her courage. One woman said, "That's her, the cleaner who found the truth." Another said, "She saved all of us." When Cato walked past her desk, he stopped. "You did something none of us had the courage to do." Tears filled Maria's eyes. She smiled and said, I just came here to clean floors, but maybe God sent me to clean hearts. From that day, Maria's job changed. She was promoted not because she had power, but because she had integrity. She became the environment supervisor of the office in charge of keeping not just the workplace clean, but its spirit too. But her greatest reward wasn't the title. It was the respect in people's eyes, the same people who once ignored her. At night, she sat by her window writing again in her diary. Operation Clean Heart successful. Outside, rain began to fall softly over Kampala. She watched the drops hit the earth and whispered, sometimes even the smallest voice can change the world. After the audit chaos and the arrests, the office of Namani Holdings was never the same again. For the first time in years, silence had a different meaning, not fear, but peace. The sound of keyboards now felt lighter. Papers didn't cry anymore, and even the air smelled honest. Maria's name spread quietly through the city like morning gossip. People whispered it in markets, in taxis, and even in churches. Did you hear about that cleaner who exposed the corruption? Ah, that brave woman from Namani Holdings. God bless her heart. At first, Maria didn't believe it. When she walked through the streets, people smiled at her. Some even clapped. A woman at the bus stop said, Sister, you made us proud. Maria smiled shyly, her eyes bright with humility. She never wanted fame. All she wanted was fairness. Back at the office, things changed slowly. The new management team arrived, younger, more respectful. They treated her with kindness. But Maria had already learned not to be blinded by smiles. She knew respect was not in the mouth, it was in the action. One afternoon, the new manager, Mr. Lyko, called her into his office. He was a tall man with calm eyes, the kind of man who didn't raise his voice to prove power. He said, Maria, we've seen your record. You've done more for this company than anyone realized. How would you feel about training new staff in ethics and workplace discipline? Maria looked at him, surprised. Sir, I am just a cleaner. He smiled. Not anymore. You are a teacher now, one who teaches by example. And that's how Maria's new chapter began. Every Monday, she stood before groups of young African employees, teaching them about honesty, patience, and courage. She didn't use fancy words or PowerPoint slides. She told stories, her stories, and somehow everyone listened. Sometimes she would say, God hides power inside small uniforms. And when the right time comes, even a broom can sweep away corruption. People laughed, but they remembered her words. But not everything was easy. With her new position came new enemies, those who thought she had climbed too high. One day, she found a note on her desk that said, You forgot where you came from. Maria read it slowly, smiled, and whispered, No, my sister, I just refused to stay there forever. That night, she sat on her small balcony, looking at the stars above Kampala. The city lights blinked like shy eyes. She took out her old diary, the same one that once brought justice, and began to write again. Power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears a cleaning uniform and walks with quiet footsteps. As she closed her diary, her phone rang. It was her younger sister, Maria. The radio is talking about you again. They said they want to interview you this Sunday. Maria laughed softly. Ah, these people. They think I am a hero, but I only told the truth. Amina said, maybe that's what heroes do. On Sunday morning, Maria wore her best dress, simple but beautiful, with bright African patterns. When she walked into the radio station, everyone turned to look. The host, a cheerful woman named Lindy, welcomed her with a wide smile. Maria Namboka, she said, the woman who changed an entire company. Tell us, how did you find the courage? Maria thought for a moment, then spoke slowly. Courage is like water in a well. It looks far, but when you need it, your hands will find it. The studio went silent. Even the sound engineer stopped moving. Her voice carried something deeper than just words. It carried truth. When she returned home that evening, she found a small crowd outside her door. Neighbors, children, old men. They clapped as she walked by, shouting, "Mama Maria, our hero." She laughed, embarrassed, and told them, "I am still the same woman who cleans her own floor." That night, she stood by her window again, wind brushing against her face. She thought of all the people still trapped under unfair bosses, still afraid to speak, and she whispered a prayer for them. May they find their courage before it breaks them. Then she smiled and said softly, "My name used to mean nothing in the office. Now it means something beyond it." And as the city slept, Maria, the cleaner who became a symbol of truth, closed her eyes with peace in her heart, because she knew, in the land where power once mocked humility, the broom had finally spoken. Years passed, and Maria's story became more than a headline. It became a lesson, whispered in classrooms, repeated in sermons, and told by mothers to their daughters before bed. In a world that often forgot the cleaners, the silent, the invisible ones, Maria's name became a song of remembrance. She never chased fame. She lived quietly, still walking to work every morning, greeting the guards, watering the flowers by the gate. Even after all the attention faded, her grace remained the same, soft, patient, and full of light. One morning, a little girl came to her at the office gate. She wore a school uniform, her hair braided neatly. "Are you Maria?" she asked shyly. Maria smiled. "Yes, child. Who are you?" The girl looked down, holding a small notebook. "My teacher told us about you. She said you were brave. I wanted to see what bravery looks like." Maria knelt down, looking into her eyes. "Bravery," she said softly, "is not loud. It's when your heart is shaking but you still speak the truth." The little girl smiled, nodded, and ran off, her laughter echoing through the morning air. And in that sound, Maria felt something deeper than pride, legacy. Time, like an old drumbeat, kept moving. Maria retired 5 years later. The company threw a small farewell party. There were no fancy speeches, just laughter, music, and memories. One of her former trainees, now a department head, stood up and said, "You taught us that honesty doesn't make you weak. It makes you unforgettable." Tears filled Maria's eyes as the crowd clapped. She returned to her village soon after, back to the soil that raised her. The air smelled of rain and mango trees. Her old mother's hut was still there, waiting like a patient friend. Maria started a small community school for girls, not to make them scholars of books, but scholars of life. Every Friday, she gathered them under a tree and told them stories about courage, fairness, and so. "Do not let the world tell you that silence is safety," she said one afternoon. "Silence protects the wrong people. Speak, even when your voice trembles." The girls nodded, their eyes wide with understanding. One evening, as the sun melted into gold behind the hills, Maria sat beside the river where she used to play as a child. The water whispered softly, carrying the sound of her past, laughter, pain, hope, forgiveness. She dipped her hands into the cool stream and smiled. "This river remembers me," she whispered. "It knows who I was before the world did." Suddenly, a familiar voice called from behind. It was Amina, her sister, now grown and strong. She came running with a letter in her hand. "Maria, You won't believe this. Maria opened it slowly. It was from the president's office, a national award for integrity and public courage. Her name printed in bold letters, Maria Namboka, the voice of truth. Maria laughed softly. Ah, God, you truly have a sense of humor. The woman who cleaned floors now receives an award for cleaning hearts. Her sister hugged her tightly, tears streaming down both their faces. Weeks later, she stood on a grand stage in the capital city. Hundreds of people watched as she received her medal. Reporters asked her, "What message do you have for the people of Uganda?" Maria looked at them and said, "Never think you are too small to change something. Even a drop of water can create ripples that reach the ocean." The crowd stood and clapped, not just for Maria, but for every woman who had ever been unseen, unheard, underestimated. When she returned home that night, she placed the medal beside her old diary. She smiled and said, "These two belong together, one for what I wrote and one for what I lived." That night, the sky was full of stars. Maria sat by her window, her heart calm. She whispered one final prayer. May my story remind every woman that courage is never wasted, even when no one is watching. As she closed her eyes, a soft wind moved through the trees, carrying her words into the distance. And somewhere far away, another young woman, maybe a cleaner, maybe a student, maybe a dreamer, felt her heart awaken. Because stories like Maria's never die. They simply travel like rivers, reminding the world that even the quietest hands can shake the earth.